Welcome back to the video crypt. I'm still Bitter Karella, and this is still the cool skeleton. We thought we'd bring you back and watch the rest of the werewolf versus the vampire women next time, because we wanted to do another of our regular installments, Hex, for trainables. Must be the season of the witch, yeah. Now this is the part of the show where we talk about some spells and charms and tips and tricks that you can use in your everyday life. And if you're like most people, you've probably wondered, Bitter Karella, how is it that witches can transform into beasts and other such wonders? And I would say to that, good question, very good question. This is something that, people have often wondered about witches, and people, it's probably one of the most envied powers that a witch has. It's not a regular witch power. Generally, every witch is known for flying to the sabbat and spoiling milk, but transforming into beasts is sort of lower on the list of general accepted witch powers, which is a shame because it's probably one of the most fun and one that you could easily do yourself. Now, there are two different schools of thought on animal transformation via witchcraft. There is the school wherein you actually transform physically into an animal, and the school where the body actually remains unchanged, but the spirit exits the body, either in the form of an animal or in the form of some sort of vapor that then enters a pre-existing animal in some sort of possession type deal. While the spirit is gone, the body just remains comatose until the spirit returns. Now, both of these techniques, they do have their dangers. First of all, remember, nature is tooth and red and claw. Wait. No, it's not. Remember that nature is red in tooth and claw. So you're a civilized person living in the big city, and what's gonna hurt you out there? It's all over good, right? No, it's actually very dangerous. If you're out there in the form of a hare and an eagle eats you, you don't get a do-over. There's no second guy. It's not a video game. You're done. So be careful while you're out there in animal form. Likewise, the other big danger of animal transformation is that there's the very real risk of forgetting that you're human. Because, it's a lot of fun out there carousing around in the form of, a squid or a nudibranch or whatever you might transform into, and you might just forget that you will have to come back home to your human form afterwards. It's very easy to kind of get lost in the ether that way. So when you do animal transformations, it's always a good idea to make sure that you're clutching some sort of token of remembrance, something that will remind you of your human roots, so that you don't just lose yourself out there, and your spirit does know to return to your body, and your body does know to turn back into a human afterwards. And you don't just lose your mind and just be a feral child or something after that. Now, tonight we're actually going to look at a couple methods for animal transformation. I did some research into both the Malleus Maleficarum and the Compendium Maleficarum, hoping to find some information about the actual method of transformation. But unfortunately, while these books are very adamant that witches can turn into animals, usually into cats, so that they can piss on church altars, they're also very incurious about the actual way that it's done. They're much more interested in retelling this exact same story over and over and over, which you, I'm sure, have heard. It's a story where a guy is out in the woods and he is attacked by a bear or a wolf or a fox or whatever, and he injures that animal either by shooting it or stabbing it or punching it in the nose or whatever. And when he returns home, he finds that his friend or neighbor or wife has been injured in the exact same way that that animal that attacked him was injured. Yeah, this is a very popular story. You hear it a lot. And quite honestly, it seems kind of weak sauce to me. I mean, oh, a person was injured and an animal was injured. Boy, that's sure compelling evidence. But regardless, I did some extra research to try and find some actual ways that you could shapeshift. There is a story of shapeshifting that I thought I would share. And this story actually takes place in the mid-1800s in New Mexico. There was a certain fruit vendor by the name of Felix, and he had traveled far from home to presumably sell fruit. Perhaps he was attending a fruit vendor's convention of some sort, but in any case, he was returning home flush with cash because it had been a successful venture for him. And the sun began to set. The day was getting, to its close, and Felix realized he still had a very long way to go. So he decided he was going to stop for the night, and he noticed a small hut along the side of the road. He decided to knock on the door and see if the homeowners would put him up for the night. So Felix knocks on the door, and two little old ladies answer. And they agree that Felix is welcome to stay. He's welcome to spend the night with them. So they invite him in for dinner. And as he's eating dinner, Felix is overcome with a strange feeling of dread. There's something strange about this house. He can't quite put his finger on it, but he's feeling ill at ease. So that night when he lies down to bed, he sticks his pistol under his pillow just to be safe. He can't sleep though. He's having some trouble, so he's lying there in bed, wide awake. Eventually he decides he starts wondering, what are those old ladies up to? Are they still out there in the living room? Kind of weird. So he goes over to the door, puts his ear to it, listens carefully, and he hears the two old ladies conversing. And one of them says to the other, that guy's got to be asleep by now. Felix is understandably unnerved by that, and he suddenly realizes, I think those two are planning to rob me. Perhaps kill me and rob me. So he jumps back into bed, closes his eyes, but listens carefully, one hand under that pillow on his pistol. The two old ladies come into the room, but rather than going over to Felix's bed, they instead go to a cabinet on the wall and pull out some random bags. And then Felix observes as these two old ladies suddenly partake in a very odd ritual. First, they open the bags and pour out a strange fine powder. They coat themselves with this powder, take 3 steps in one direction, 3 steps in another, jump into a tub of water, and both are instantly transformed into owls, fluttering around the room for a few minutes, but then they just skedoodle right up the chimney. Felix, of course, is astounded by this wonder, and he decides, well, as long as I'm here, I should find out as much about this as I can. So he goes over and investigates that powder, noting that there's a label on the bag that just says, Magic Powder, San Antonio, Texas. But he's not deterred. He takes that powder, throws it upon himself, jumps 3 steps one way, 3 steps another, into a tub of water. Nothing happens. Felix is a little discouraged. But then he remembers he's still got his crucifix on. And knowing that the crucifix is a ward against diabolical magic, he removes it and tries again. Again, powder, 3 steps one way, 3 steps another, into a tub of water. Presto, Felix is now an owl. And he goes right up that chimney, where he suddenly finds himself in the middle of a huge flock of owls. He doesn't really know what to do, so he just goes along with them, and pretty soon he is at a party up on the mountaintop where witches in the forms of owls and cats are all carousing. Felix has, a little bit of fun with this in the party, but eventually starts getting nervous, realizing that these folks might notice that he's an interloper. And so he leaves, goes back to the house, down the chimney, does the whole ritual again, returns to his human form, gets back in bed. All good. At least he thought so. He thought he was undetected, but the next morning when he woke up, the old ladies asked him, so did you like the party? Felix was a little upset, but the women assured him, don't worry, it's all good. It's fine, don't worry about it. Just don't tell anyone about that or something bad will happen to you. And Felix, many years after this incident, recounted they did warn him, but hey, as Felix says, I just like to talk. And I've told this story many, many times. Nothing bad's ever happened to me. Probably because I politely refused breakfast when they offered it to me. And very often, witches, especially in the American Southwest, do their magic via contaminated food. So they probably would have slipped something into his huevos rancheros that would have put some sort of spell on him, which would have caused something bad to happen to Felix if he'd blabbed. But luckily, he avoided that. Now that's I've always found that story kind of interesting. But the question is, we have the ritual, of course. Felix mentions it's just put out powder on yourself, 3 steps one way, 3 steps another, tub of water. But what is in that powder? That's the question. Well, luckily, Felix was able to determine that too. I will show it to you using my witch spice cabinet. Now, smelling the powder, Felix was able to determine the key ingredients in there. Number 1, chili powder. Number 2, anise seeds. Number 3, sugar. Number 4, very important, probably key ingredients, puyamate powder, which is a indigenous plant to that region. And finally, he also noticed little bits of something that were clearly powdered hummingbird bones. Also very relevant, now this is something Felix did not notice, but I also found through my investigations of Southwestern witchcraft. Very important thing to have with you for animal transformations is lodestones. Now I've got 2 right here in this little bag, hopefully you can see them. Lodestones are naturally occurring magnetic rocks, and they're useful for lots of things, removing hexes, counteracting jinxes, but they're also very useful for having in the area when you do animal transformations. They have power that you can draw on for that. Now you don't actually use them in the spell, just having them in the room, you're able to draw power from them, so that's an important element to have with you. And you'll always want to keep your lodestones fed with a little bit of magnetic sand. That way they'll stay, that really charges their power. Now that was one method of achieving shape-shifting, and that was one that relied more on physical transformation. I'm going to show you another one. This was more towards the spirit flight sort, so this is one that would involve the spirit leaving the body and going into either pre-existing animal or else just transforming into an animal once the spirit is left. To do this, first you're going to need an ointment that is, it's actually very similar to the ointment which you would use in spirit flight and going to the Sabbat, because of course both involve the spirit flying, so it would make sense. So for this one, it's a very simple unguent to make. What you will need is very simple. You're gonna need 4 tablespoons of wormwood, 4 tablespoons of mugwort. After that, 1 cup sweet almond oil, now you at home are going to then put that in an oven at 200 degrees for 4 hours, but since we've got our cauldron, we're just gonna do it a little old-fashioned. All right. So after your mixture has been percolating for about 4 hours at 200 degrees, you'll remove it from the oven, strain it with a cheesecloth to remove all the plant fibers, and then you're going to melt some beeswax and combine that with the resulting oil that you've got here. You're going to mix it in a ratio of 1 part beeswax to 5 parts oil. You're going to reheat it to melt that wax and combine it all. Finally, once that's all done, you're going to put it into, you can bottle that. Now, for using this in shape-shifting, you are going to use this unguent, apply it to the elbows, chest, neck, pulse points. And that is going to help you in shape-shifting. It's not the only thing you need, though. We are going to get into the next thing you'll need in just a second. Now that we've got our unguent, that's not the end of it, though, because you're also going to need a magical animal pelt, basically of the animal that you're intending to shift into. Now you're probably asking, where would you get a magical animal pelt? And the short answer is it's usually gifted to you by the devil. However, if that's not an option, any animal pelt will actually do, even if it's not magical, if it's just a regular pelt. The important thing is that it is, well, hopefully it's of the animal that you're hoping to shift into, but if not, it should be something that gets you in that sort of mindset. Now, having donned your magical pelt, you're going to take your unguent, you're going to apply it, like I said, neck, chest, elbows, any place that would actually aid in getting that going. And finally, of course, you have to do the proper incantation. And for that, we are going to be consulting the grimoire. There are many different variations, many different incantations, but for our purposes, we're going to be using a very basic one. And I'll recite that to you right now. And I shall go into a hare with sorrow and sighing of meckle care. And I shall go in the devil's name until I come back home again. And I shall go into a crow with sorrow and sighing and blackest throw. And I shall go in the devil's name until I come home again. And I shall go into a cat with sorrow and sigh and a black shot. Not much of a rhyme there. And I shall go in the devil's name until I come home again. And I shall go into a goat with blackest hooves and blackest coat. And I shall go in the devil's name until I come home again. Into the form of a weasel go I, with blackest shot on blackest throw. And I shall go in the devil's name until I come home again.
Goose Butler.